Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at Bet Boxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets. Or you can subscribe to the channel and click that notifications button and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. Before we get into the boxing, I just want to say that what's occurring, obviously, in Jerusalem at the moment is heartbreaking. You know, it really is truly terrible, and I hope God may lay his healing hand on the situation and bring serenity because, there are some truly terrible scenes. So for those of you that are affected that might be watching, I know I've got a few subscribers from all over the world, including the Middle East, which is very, very flattering to have you guys with us. I wish you the very, very best. I really do, and I hope there's a peaceful resolution to all that we're seeing, all the terrible things that we're seeing. I believe that, you know, if the last year has taught us anything, there are some very, very dark forces at play in this world that have a lot to benefit from and gain from tearing people apart. So I really hope that, you know, sanity and peace prevails. Now, moving on from that, I want to give a little shout out to Chris Ackers. Now, Chris Ackers is a subscriber to the channel, and he's just become an author, published his book. It's a boxing book, so it's very relevant. It's called The King of the Journeyman, The Life of Peter Buckley. I will put a link to the description box of this video for anybody that's interested in purchasing this book. It's a book basically about Peter Buckley, who was a journeyman that fought over 300 fights. He was in prison prior to that. He's fought against prospects as well as future world champions. So you can imagine he must have an awful lot of stories to tell. So if you're interested in something like that, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I did a video here on this channel where I was discussing sort of the boxing psychology of the B and C level fighter. First, I did a video talking about the similarities of the boxing psychology of guys like Fury, Wilder and Muhammad Ali, and contrasting that and comparing it to somebody like Anthony Joshua, who I believe was on a different end of the spectrum psychologically. And then after that, I did one about the mentality of B and C level fighters. And this sort of continues on from that, I guess, that sort of thought process. If you're looking to explore those sorts of ideas, this might be a good place to start to get into the mindset of a man like Peter Buckley. So if you're interested in that, the description box will have the link to that book. Moving on, we'll talk about first Billy Joe Saunders. Okay, I'm going to be quick on this because I know it's been covered extensively, but I just want to clarify a couple of things for a few people. He has a quadruped fracture, according to Eddie Hearn and various esteemed boxing journalists like Mike Coppinger. To put this into perspective, you know, if you've got a boiled egg, right, and you want to have a soft-boiled egg with soldiers, the Brits out there will know what I'm talking about, but the non-Brits might not. So soldiers, when we were kids, we used to call them, you take the toast, your bread, your toast, and then you slice it into strips, and then you take the head off of a soft-boiled egg, and you dip them in, and you have your toast with soft-boiled yolk, right? Well, the process of cracking the egg is that you'd get a butter knife. I mean, I'd use a spoon, but whatever. You're supposed to get a butter knife, and you're supposed to crack around the head of the egg, the top of the egg, and then you can just literally almost like decapitate it, take the head off of it, right? Well, a quadruped fracture, imagine the cheekbone, the eye socket, that area, imagine it's an egg. It's the same sort of thing whereby it's a crack on each side. Now, to put things into perspective, you're talking about a crack down the eye here, so I'll just show you on my own face, a crack that goes from the eye down to the cheek, one that goes beneath the eye, so the area where the eyeball actually sits on, inside the skull. You have a crack that comes across here, and then you can also have a crack that goes up as well. The point is that the eye, the structure of that whole part of the face is devastated. And one more punch could literally either shatter or dislodge a bone and cause the bone to pierce the eyeball and or cut a nerve, the optical nerve perhaps, and permanently blind you. This is how serious of an injury Billy Joe Saunders had, for those that consider him to be a quitter. Now, there are some people who are saying, well, I want to see the x-ray before I believe that. Well, listen, first and foremost, nobody's obligated to put out their medical records for anybody else. This is the official line. If you don't want to believe it, you don't have to believe it. But there are also levels of orbital bone fractures, okay? This is the worst of the worst. Like, this is, you know, I know Paulie Malignaggi, who I've always said is a great warrior. People don't give him credit because he wasn't a huge puncher. People don't understand the warrior out mindset and the heart that this guy had. He had a broken orbital bone against Miguel Cotto when he was losing the fight, and he started to turn the fight around started to turn it in his favor against the prime Miguel Cotto. And then Raps got undone on his boxing glove. There was a delay. Cotto was able to regroup and he took control of the fight and won it down the stretch. But this was an inexperienced Paulie Malignaggi that had his first step up. And he was asked about this when he was talking about Kell Brook and his injury. And he basically said, listen, what I went through back then, I went through hell. I would never repeat that again. It was like a one-off thing where, I was over that mindset at 25 years old, 24 years old. I went for it. But you also have to understand, as far as I'm aware, Paulie Malignaggi's was one crack down the cheekbone. And that's why I think to this day, he has a dead nerve along the cheek. So he's not the same in that regard, okay? Billy's is much, much worse. And you look at guys like Israel Vasquez, for instance. He was criticized, I remember, when he quit against Rafael Marquez. I think that was in the third round. I think that was the fight I'm thinking of. Anyway, to this day, Israel Vasquez has a glass eye. What would you do if I told you that this day he has a glass eye, right? Now, if you were a fan of Israel Vasquez, what did you do when you did? Maybe you called him a quitter or you demanded he leaves everything on the table. What did you do? Did you relocate to California to go and live near him, to help support him? Did you do that? You have guys like Muhammad Ali, guys that transcend the sport, an unbelievable specimen of a man who oozed charisma in and out of the ring. He was gliding around the ring, doing things that heavyweights had never previously done before. A larger-than-life character who wasn't afraid to stand up to any organization or any person. He was his own man, an inspiration to millions around the world. When he got to the point where he could no longer walk, when he got to the point where he needed someone else to wipe his own backside after going to the toilet, were you there to wash his backside? Were you there? No. But you love Ali, right? You're willing to applaud and say, there goes the great Ali. But you weren't there for him in his suffering. So when fans aren't willing to relocate and go and become somebody's full-time carer, don't demand that they leave things on the table that takes years off of their lives or their well-being. These people have family. So no, Billy Joe Saunders is not a quitter. The fact that he was able to go for 90 seconds more, it was halfway through the round that occurred, 90 seconds more, taking big shots and not go down, shows that he went out on his shield. That's a warrior right there. He could have taken a knee, he didn't. And if he had taken a knee, that wouldn't make him weak either. Now, if you're talking about quitting in the sense of the literal term, he was unable to continue, of course, yeah, okay, he quit. But if you're talking about it from the perspective that it somehow suggests weakness or a lack of desire or a lack of what Chris Eubank would call a warrior code, then I'm sorry, but you're completely off the mark. It will be interesting also to see, by the way, when Inoue comes back, who's had an orbital bone injury himself, not as serious as Billy Joe's, but it'll be interesting to see if he's going to be the same, because the majority of fighters are not the same again. In fact, I can't think of any. So, just look at Antonio Margarito. His eye is even hard to look at, let alone him getting in the ring and having a fight. So, yeah, I thought Billy Joe, who put out a statement to say he didn't feel as though he was out of his depth, I agree with him 100%. I don't think he was out of his depth. I think he gave a fantastic account of himself. I did say in the preview video that he had to be careful, be wary of ducking too frequently and often, because he could very well duck into a powerful shot that could change the trajectory of the entire fight. It could be decisive, and indeed it was. So, I'm not making, because somebody said to me, are you trying to suggest that Canelo was lucky? Well, clearly not, because I told you that this could potentially happen. I'm not saying he's lucky, but Billy Joe Saunders, I thought, gave a great account of himself, and I think he made a big error. He tried to throw a leaping right hook off of a telegraphed coil without a setup, and landed short, fell short, obviously, when you're telegraphing it against such a brilliant counterpuncher, in the pocket. He landed in the pocket, having fallen short. He's asking for trouble. This is the equivalent of a centre-back in a football match playing an under-hit back pass to the goalkeeper, and then you have a world-class striker like Lewandowski come and intercept the ball, and he's now one-on-one with the goalkeeper. You know he's scoring because he's that good. So I'm not undermining Canelo. A lesser striker might not score that goal. A lesser boxer might not have capitalized. But when you're up against Canelo Alvarez, you can't afford to make such a dramatic individual mistake, in my opinion. And this sort of mistake, British fighters have made before. George Groves, I spoke about, making that error against Carl Froch, looking to throw a wide a very wide leading left hook with his back on the ropes without exiting the center line. You're asking to be caught with a straight right hand. If you're going to look to counter a right hand with a left hook, you better get that head off the center line. And then he went and made a similar error against Badu Jack. So these are errors, but it doesn't mean they're not at a high level. And Billy Joe Saunders proved, in my opinion, he could hang with the best of them. For sure, he just came up short in that key moment, you know, and that's just one of those things. Canelo Alvarez, he is who he is for a reason. Now, moving on from that, let's talk about this fight that's dragging on and on. I know a lot of people are getting bored of it. Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury. But I did do a video a while back where Bob Arum said he doesn't think the fight will happen until 2022. And we were speaking about this, and on that particular video, I had a couple of comments from a couple of subscribers who are, you know, guys that I really, really value their opinions. I love hearing from them. TMT and Ra, R-A-H. Before I read you the sorts of things they had said back then, this was over a week ago now, 12 days ago, something like that. Before I tell you about the things they've said, Frank Warren has come out and he said, look, we need to see proof of funds. We need to see that money in a bank to tell us, look, we've got the money ready. It's available. Not just, oh yeah, take our word for it. Now, in fairness to Eddie Hearn, he has come out and he said, look, I've worked with these people before. They've delivered on everything. So Anthony and I trust them. But I can understand, said Eddie, that the other side haven't worked with them. And so they want to see proof of funds, and we will get there, and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, I totally believe Eddie Hearn is very, very keen to make this fight happen. They all are, just like I said in that video. They all are. It would make no sense for them not to be. There's too much money for them to gain. Now, with that in mind, I also rate him for not trying to undermine the other side and imply that there's some sort of duck going on. Because what we've seen a lot of is fans jumping on the case and saying, oh, look, this is proof Fury doesn't want it. Or this is proof Eddie Hearn's just talking rubbish for the fight then to fall through. And then it's a convenient way of ducking Fury. You've got all these conspiracy theories about this particular fight coming up. I don't buy into any of them in this particular regard. I do think Eddie Hearn's trying his best. But why aren't they getting the proof of funds? Well, TMT, I'm going to read you TMT and Raw, what they said a week ago, because now this is starting to look a lot more realistic, particularly because we'd never heard an issue of proof of funds before yesterday's interview with Frank Warren. TMT said, the protagonists do not want to lose any money due to sanitary measures, none of them. They had to go beyond the usual routes. They checked if some states were willing to bankroll the fight, and the answer apparently was no. The Saudi state, the most likely candidate, is under the water with catastrophic finances due to COVID and structural issues. AJ Ruiz was staged by public money coming from the Saudi Commission for Sports and Entertainment. Fury and Joshua will not be, at least not before a few months. Hearn is now trying to find private investors, which are, as you know, massively dodgy and unreliable. Promise anything and then never call back when you ask them to certify the money. That's the issue here, right? The certification, the proof of funds. He goes on to say, this will take time. Arum and Warren don't believe in these shady investors and are not exploring such paths themselves. Arum must have had his fair share of BS offers coming from Asia for Pacquiao over the years. Also take this into account. Qatar has football, the Emirates has the UFC, Saudi Arabia wants boxing. Joshua and Fury is the biggest fight in boxing. I'm a Saudi private investor and I'm 100% not daring to stage the biggest fight in boxing knowing that the Saudi state will want to stage it itself when deficits come under control. I'm not taking the chance of Mohammed bin Salman thinking I've forgotten my place and that I'm cutting the grass under his royal feet. I'm not taking that chance for 1 second. If Riyadh has not given the absolute green light and to actually support these negotiations, then it's all smoke and mirrors. It's like it's the case 99% of the time with Gulf private investors when it comes to sports. And Ra commented to say, I've always thought that the Saudi offer doesn't make sense for a summer event. The only reason any Gulf state would put up the money is for it to act as a leader for the tourist industry. But nobody is going to want to go there in that heat and with travel restrictions around the pandemic still in place. They've not even lifted restrictions for the Hajj pilgrimage. So this is basically telling you of the severity, I guess, of the financial impact that this has had in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. And so these guys were telling us before it had come to the fore that, it was mentioned, it was hinted at, can the Saudis come up with the cash? Aram had sort of hinted at that. Well, now Frank Warren's put it on the table and he said, listen, this is the one big obstacle. We need to see proof of funds. Put it in an account, show us the money. In other words, certify the money, as TMT put it. And he did say, TMT, that this would not be possible, as did Ra. They said this fight will not happen. Maybe this is what Chisora knew all along when he was saying the reason this fight wouldn't happen. Maybe this is why Bob Arum has been saying this fight won't happen before 2022. I really want to see the fight. I think any logical boxing fan will want to see the fight. But we keep hearing next week. Have you lost a belief that this fight will happen? Let me know what you think about everything discussed in this video. Do you think that the underlying issues here will be resolved and we will see the fight this summer or this year? At the moment, they're talking about potentially August the 14th, I believe, a week after the Olympic Games. Is that reasonable? Also, if it does happen in Saudi Arabia in an outdoor stadium, is it going to be too hot? I mean, think about that, right? That'll play a role too. I'm not sure Saudi Arabia is as humid as going further north, like Egypt or, Cyprus, the island of Cyprus, very humid places. I'm not sure if the Saudi Arabian heat is as humid, is it? Or is it more like you get more in places like Africa and sort of West Africa, whereby it's sort of drier heat, where it's a lower humidity? Let me know if you've been or if you know the answer to this question. In other words, what I'm asking is, when the sun goes down, if it's humid, it's still going to be hot and a difficult condition to fight in. If not, the temperature drops quite significantly after sunset. So do you think heat will be a problem for the performance of these two athletes, if indeed we get to see the fight? And let me know if you've got any views on the whole Billy Joe Saunders thing. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. God bless.